Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's event, which is part of Bristol Festival of Ideas. It can't have escaped your notice that the Festival of Ideas autumn programme has had to move online this year, but I can reassure you that it will be featuring writers and thinkers from all over the world. Now, a few kind of housekeeping rules, if you like, and some information. You can sign up to our newsletter via the website. You can follow us on Twitter. And this event will be available to watch again at the end via the Crowdcast system, and it'll also be added to our YouTube channel. So I'm Suzanne Rolt. I'm Chief Executive of the Concert Hall St George's Bristol, and I'm also very fortunate to be Chair of Festival of Ideas. And it really does give me enormous, genuine pleasure to be introducing this event with Kadie, as she's known, Kanneh-Mason, author of House of Music, Raising the Kanneh-Masons, which I'm holding up for you to see here. And in a little plug, I would just say that if you haven't read this book and you don't have it, you absolutely must. It's a must buy, a must read. And there's a little connection on your screen somewhere which takes you through to Waterstones where you can buy a copy. So Kadie is a former lecturer in English at Birmingham University, but she gave this up to be a full-time mother to an absolutely extraordinary family of 7 siblings who have taken the classical music world by storm. Many of us have, I'm sure, read reports in the press about the talents of the Kanneh-Mason family, particularly Isita, Braimar and cellist Cheku, who of course came to fame when he won the BBC Young Musician competition. And many of us have had the good fortune and a blissful experience of listening to concerts given by the family, either live in concert halls around the UK or on TV. Now, Kadie has written this wonderfully absorbing memoir, and it tells the story of how this musical dynasty has come to be. You've described it, Kadie, as a story of love and music, but I think it's also a very honest account of what goes on behind the headlines and the sound bites behind the most musical family in the world. It shows the phenomenal levels of dedication and sacrifice needed to reach the heights of the excellence that your children have, but it also raises really, really important issues around race, immigration, and indeed the state of music education in this country. So I hope these are all things that we'll have a chance to chat about over the next 45 minutes. Just to say to everyone in the audience, welcome. I recognise many of the names. Lovely to know you're there, even though I can't see or hear you. We have 45 minutes. You can put some questions in the Ask a Question box, and we will try and get to those either during the conversation or at the end. So Kadie, welcome. I'd like to start by looking at where it all began. So this generation of Kanneh-Masons is obviously truly exceptional, but it's fair to say that they haven't simply emerged from nowhere. And you say something very profound, I think, early on in your book, where you say, it has taken generations of love and sacrifice to create the conditions and the confidence for our children to be classical performers. So could you just take us back a little bit to your own parents, to your husband Stuart, to his parents and grandparents, because I think there were glimpses of this extraordinary musical talent there.
Yes, when I started writing the book, I thought I can't just start with Stuart and me bringing up the children because it would make no sense about what our values were and why we decided to introduce them to music. So then I had to go back to my childhood, my parents, Stuart's parents. And Stuart comes from a family of musicians, actually. He's got an uncle who was a great jazz guitarist. His mother played the piano. His sister studied music at university. He has a pop musician cousin in his family. And also his parents were very keen on classical music. Even coming from Antigua, it was something that was part of their, I suppose, desire and their interest. So they wanted their children to learn classical music. And with my family, my father was from Sierra Leone, but even he was always wanted to be a pianist, which my mother found fascinating. She's from Wales, because she said she didn't know where that came from. And his greatest dream was to be conducting an orchestra. So that love of classical music was there also on my Welsh side. It was my mother who taught me the piano to begin with. So we had lots of encouragement, lots of background. But as I say in the book, for Stuart and me, we could never dream of becoming classical musicians. That took another generation, I think, of confidence and well, I suppose opportunity as well.
Yes, and I think, you know, just leading on from that, you, as you say, you grew up in South Wales and for much of your early life. And there are some beautiful passages early on in the book, very evocative passages where you talk about male voice choirs, Dylan Thomas and Richard Burton, of course, all things that I recognise from my own upbringing in South Wales. And you really bare your soul because you open up about the experience of being a mixed race child in the 1970s, which was, you know, it's quite a cruel place, I think, at times, Great Britain. And again, to quote something from the book, because it was something I found incredibly shocking but very moving. You described yourself as an alien landed from another planet. I learned to feel shame. I learnt that my hair was the wrong texture, my skin was too brown and my nose was too wide. Only at home with the doors shut, my face reflected in the eyes of my brothers and sisters, could I be natural. So Kadie, this must be very painful to remember and to write about. Is that the case? I'm sure it is.
Yes, it was incredibly difficult because I thought I can't talk about my own anxieties about bringing up the children and encouraging them to go into a world which was in many ways not seen as their world without talking about why that was. And I think for Stuart and I, growing up in the 1970s in Britain was a very difficult time. I came as an immigrant in 1970 and it was a huge shock, because suddenly I was seen as different and unwelcome. And I think that's the experience of so many Black people and Black families in the 1970s and 1980s. And obviously it's reality now as well. But that's definitely there in the background.
Yeah, no, well, that comes through very, very strongly. And it's a real, you know, it's a reminder of what things were like and really for us to hope. And of course, all the work that your family is doing will hopefully make sure that we won't go back to that ever, and we will move on. And I think again, you know, that there was this amazing musical talent, as you say, in the generation above you that came before you. But you also talk as well about, you know, something about music not being for you, for your family. And I have to say, I know that Stuart's listening to this at the moment. But he's just clearly been extraordinary throughout the last, 20 years or so, because he has refused to accept any of these barriers, hasn't he? And he's absolutely knocked them down and felt, yes, this is our place to be here. So I imagine you feel a lot of this has been possible, not just because of what you have done, but because of Stuart as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think a lot of the way we brought up the children has relied on his, what I call risk taking, because he has never thought to think, okay, who's gone before us so that we can follow the same path. He's very happy to lay new paths. And I think that kind of courage is so important. And I think if it were left to me, I would probably be drawing in and protecting everybody and being worried. But definitely he was the one that flung open the doors and said, let's just carry on and do it.
Yeah, and there's again a lovely moment where you talk about, I think it's, I'm never sure because some of the names are the same in the different generations, but Aunt Rhonda, and she talks about when there were doubts about Isita, who we're going to speak about in a moment, your first child, the doubts about whether she should be applying for the Royal Academy, whether she should be performing her own piano concerto. I think it was Aunt Rhonda who said, think like Muhammad Ali, I am the greatest.
Exactly.
Well, I think your family has shown that. So Isita, really, I mean, I think that in the profession I work in, it's not unusual to encounter musical prodigies, but most families can only support one, maybe two at the most. And you've had 7, which is truly phenomenal. But Isita was the first child. She was very clearly very, very able and exceptional in her abilities from an early age, and probably a sign that something special was afoot. I'd say, having read the book, that you were kind of very much thrown in the deep end with Isata because of this extreme ability, being so talented. So could you tell us a bit more about that experience, about Isata herself, but maybe about how you were feeling when you had this first child and recognizing this talent?
Yes, because before we had children, we had no plans to bring up children who were going to be classical musicians at all. But then Isata came along, and she was someone who learned to read incredibly quickly. She was very bright at school, and someone who just seemed like a kind of knot of not tension, but desperate to learn. And we thought she needed music in lots of ways. And so when we started her on the piano, it was incredible. It was as though she took off like a rocket and learnt things much quicker than she should do. And she was just someone we thought, well, we just have to let fly, and she did. It was incredible. But also it's a great responsibility when you have a child like that, because you can't just sit back and just let it lie fallow. You then have to say, okay, we've got to give this child the opportunities, which is quite a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, so, and we're going to come on to that, because I think that what you've had to do has been exhausting. We'll talk about a regime which I think would have finished most of us off, to be honest. But you do, throughout the book there are these beautiful words of wisdom, and you too talk about how the gift of time and concentration is what you've given Isata, and indeed your other children as well. And I think probably many of us feel we have children and we sometimes pop them in front of the TV or something, but actually what I hear from you, and I think the grandparents as well, giving them the time to sit there, listen and encourage them.
Yes, exactly. And people often say to me, well, how did you get them to want to practice? Because we can't get our children to practice. But actually, and maybe this is the gift of having a large family as well, that half hour when you sit with them and listen to them, and it's a one-to-one, they see as a great gift, because it's the moment when you're giving them attention. So for them, it was a wonderful thing rather than something they did in a lonely, isolated, miserable way. And I think also there's a view that classical music is a painful thing, but actually it's not. It's very joyful, it's very beautiful, and it's a privilege to be able to play and learn.
Yes, no, I agree. I think we tend to think, I think the painful time is when we think about all the practicing in rooms on our own. And I think, again, that comes up in the book, doesn't it, where you talk about in Wales and about the experience of kind of going into what I always used to call the front parlour, which was, usually a very dark room, unheated, because no one ever was allowed to go in there. But that's where the piano would stand, and that's where you'd have to practice on your own. And I think, I can't remember if it was you or your mother who had that experience.
So it was my mother had that experience. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why she didn't give me that experience, actually. Yeah. The piano was right in the front room, which we all used, and she would sit with me and practice. So it was a very different experience. So I loved it.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it, because I had the same experience of it being in the parlour, and it was very off-putting. I wasn't allowed out for my tea until I'd finished my scales. So.
Exactly.
But yeah, anyway, coming back to the book, I mean, one of the recurring themes in your book is you talk a lot about the sheer exhaustion you experience, Kadie, and perhaps we shouldn't be surprised about that. But you talk about some of your pregnancies where you were literally on your hands and knees. It was very hard physically. You were on the verge of physical collapse. And yet, on top of this, you then had to embark on, what was a relentless regime, really, which was to feed and clothe the children, to dress them, to get them off to school, to take lessons, to, as you say, ensure that they practice. And quite frankly, I really do think it would be beyond most people and most couples to be able to do this. So can you again just share a little of the colour, some of the things around this, perhaps tell us about what a day might have looked like in the Kanneh-Mason household a few years ago?
But what I was very keen to show was that I'm not some amazing earth mother who can just do everything, like an Amazonian woman who does everything in her stride, and that pregnancy is difficult and motherhood is not an easy thing. And I think all us mothers get very tired. We don't have patience that goes on for 24 hours. And so, yes, a typical day when they were all little was you get up early in the morning, getting them ready for school, or walking them all to school in a great parade with some in a pushchair, some holding on. And then you get back and you've still got toddlers in tow. You've still got all the washing to do, cooking, and it never ever stops. And of course, they come home in the evening and you're practicing with the older ones one at a time. And it's just a kind of controlled chaos, I suppose.
That's a lovely way of putting it. And I think, we think particularly of William Barris now, Sheku, who we think of as this kind of model of kind of musical discipline and perfection. And yet he, I'm not sure if he's now moved on from his teenage years. Yes, he has. But, he is just a teenage boy. And you talk about this rush out to the car in the mornings and about him trying to pull his shoe or sock on or having forgot something. And I guess it's reassuringly normal, really, isn't it? It is just a normal family. And the kids, just normal.
Absolutely, yes. And they're all mischievous and big personalities and, of course, breaking rules secretly with each other. So it's like managing, I suppose, a gang of their own.
Yes, I was going to talk about this because this is one of the most fascinating things for me because, again, kind of coming back to these words of wisdom, and again, to keep quoting you because there is so much that's quotable, Kadie, here. But you talk about how you had to learn that parenting is a constant conversation between one's expectations and a powerfully present person before you. And I think it's fair to say you had 7 powerfully present people before you. But then you describe this gang that you just mentioned. You talk about how what we imagined as a perfect structure of rules and expectations sprouted a forest of wild undergrowth and clambering branches that we had to battle through. And as the family grew, the children nurtured between them a powerful group identity, which was built on sharing, equality, kindness, and love. But it also fostered collaboration, gang secrets, loyalty, and a bond to each other that lay outside your reach. So that there's clearly a real interdependency here. And I think we see a kind of media that picks out individual members at different times. But they really were, I love that idea of the undergrowth, but a gang of 7.
Yes.
Was that scary at times?
No, I thought it was excellent actually, because I think as parents, you have to, we were always keen that we had a family who relied on each other. Because of course, as parents, we're going to be, I suppose, to put it morbidly, the first to die, hopefully. So you want them to be able to support each other. And so, yes, we were very naive at the beginning. We thought we laid down the rules and they would just follow them, and it was all very simple. And then we realized actually there was so much going on out of our sight between them. And at first we thought, whoa, what's going on here? But actually we thought, actually, this is a very good thing. And it's carried on. They're very much a gang together, which is great.
But what's the impact on that as they start to go off to college to embark on professional careers as musicians? Do you and do they feel that loss really of that time together?
Well, what was interesting, of course, is the older 4 all went to the Royal Academy of Music, more or less together, or a year in between. And so at one point they were all 4 of them were there. And so 2 of them, I mean, the boys still live together. They all live within about 5 minutes of each other. Jennifer's now gone to the Royal College of Music, but they're all very much, they see each other all the time. So I haven't felt yet the separation. So we'll see. I think they will all have very individual careers, but at the moment they're still very much together as well.
And I think that you talk about the individual careers, and I think we've spoken, Kadie, just about within music. I think there can be a loneliness for a musician. So people often say to me, gosh, these wonderful musicians who come through the door of your concert hall, how amazing. And I say, well, actually, yes, it is, but it's a difficult life. It can be lonely. particularly as a soloist, where you arrive in a city, I guess, on your own, and you can't be there all the time, and it's not appropriate. But chamber music, we thought, was the antidote to this, didn't we? Would you agree with that? It's, kind of forming groups, which of course they've done, haven't they? As you say, the 4 elders are part of a group.
Yes, and they did it from when they were really little. And again, I think that's another secret of getting them to practice, because they did their individual practice, but they always came together and played chamber music together. And whether it was chamber music already written, or whether it was their own, I suppose, jamming together and feeding off each other. I mean, sometimes they'd be playing an individual piece, they'd all get together and they would join in and play their own parts to that piece. So no piece was ever individual or separate. And I think if you have that sense of collaboration and company, it's never a lonely thing. But you're right, the life of a soloist can be very lonely. And we've always tried to have someone be there when Sheku or Isata are in a lonely city on their own. Sometimes that's not possible. But they do intersperse it with lots of chamber music or duo playing, which is fantastic.
Because, although you haven't always been seen, you have been there for a lot of the very important musical moments in your children's lives. And I think you write about being there. I think it was when Sheku was playing in the final of the BBC Young Musician, and about how you were willing him on for every note, every bow stroke. It was almost like you were scared to breathe. It was such an intense moment for you, because you felt if you weren't there taking him through from your position in the audience, it might almost fail. So you weren't seen, but you were such, even at that point, an absolute essential part of what was happening on stage. And I don't know if that was just for you, but perhaps subconsciously Sheku at that point might have felt your presence there. Do you think that's too fanciful, or?
No, I think actually with a lot of the concerts and a lot of the big occasions like BBC Young Musician, it's a whole family effort. And I think all of us, it was very necessary that all of us were there, because we were there at every step of the way. So I think for Sheku, it was important that he had all his family there, and also his teacher and his friends. But there is that sense of nothing is done on your own. And I think I'm like probably a lot of parents, in that when your child is on stage, you're not exactly enjoying it in a relaxed way. What you're doing is living it. And that responsibility and that feeling of needing to be in every moment is a very powerful one.
It is, and I guess it's the thing which then goes on into the audience as well, isn't it? And this is why live performance is so important, because there is a giving, there is a two-way process, and that energy, that intensity that you get, it's the artists feed off that. It's absolutely vital.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a live performance is nothing like a recording. It's nothing like where you're playing to yourself and then giving the music, because as you say, it's that conversation between audience and artist creates something very alive and very different.
So of course we're in kind of funny times at the moment. So having said, of course, that some of your children have left and gone off, have they all been back in the house during COVID? Have you had a house full again?
Well, from March till, when was it, about 5.5 months, they all came home, because of course the Royal Academy wasn't open, there was nothing they could do, so of course they all came home and played music all day. But now they are in London, and we're going to see what happens with this lockdown. The universities are open now, and the schools are open, so it's very different to the last lockdown. But of course concerts are all being cancelled, so we're back to that very difficult time. So it's remained difficult really since March. So.
Yes, it has, and will be for a bit longer, I think. So talking about that, I mean, I can see one piano there behind you, and I think I might have caught a glimpse of another piano in the same room. There's another one over there. But for those who haven't read the book or seen any of the documentaries, just again, kind of explain to us how all these 7 children would be practicing because I think they had to get up very, very early in the morning. So tell us about that, how early, the dedication it takes, what time you get up. But where would they be around the house then as they're practicing? Because I think you mentioned the bathroom.
Yes, as they grew up, they practiced everywhere. So we started off with one piano when Isata started, but it has since grown to 4 pianos. There are 2 pianos in one room, so they can practice concerti together. So we'd have people in the dining room. We've got 2 rooms with pianos in. We've got a piano in the hallway as well. They would practice in the living room, they'd practice in their bedrooms. And yes, there was a stage where they were practicing in the bathroom, but we had to stop that because the acoustics are too giving. So, so we stopped that. But yeah, literally it was everywhere. At one point, Brymo was practicing in the garage just so that he could have a bit of peace and quiet. But there is no peace and quiet in the house.
No, I can't imagine there is. Yeah, a very boomy acoustic in the bathroom, I think you'd have. So, but you can enjoy that, and
exactly.
Yeah, and then bring that into your performance, that big voiced instrument. So we're kind of laughing a lot because it is just because I just keep thinking, oh, what an amazing family, and what amazing things all 7 children are achieving, or will go on to achieve indeed. But there is a cost, I think, for you as well. And I'm very aware that you're a very accomplished woman in your own right. You gave up the lecturing in English because this is what you had to do for your family. But you've talked about the kind of the deeper cost at times. And there's a point, I think it might have been when you were out in Bahrain possibly, and you were registering, you were in the midst of this, the regime that we talked about, with everything that needs to be done. And then you talked about how you began to lose definition at the edges, and you said that you were fading behind the blur of motherhood as though you had never existed. And that feels a very scary thing for someone who is so able in her own right. And did you feel and register this at the time, or is it only when you've been writing the book and looked back on it that you've seen it for what it is?
No, I think this is quite common, I found, with lots of mothers, that maybe it's because motherhood isn't really valued in society, that you are made to feel as though when you have stopped work, that somehow your identity, that's all it is. And you do feel a lessening of self, which is very difficult. And I always felt that it's housework, bringing up children is not something with any status. And it is very difficult. I think you need a lot of courage, a lot of self-belief, a lot of belief in that what you're doing is a valuable job in itself, and it's meaningful, because there's nothing in society that reflects that. So it is very difficult. And I think it's actually quite difficult on a couple when one is not working and the other is working, because I think there's a huge burden on being the breadwinner, and then there's a huge burden on being the person who stays at home. Very difficult. In our case, it was necessary because of the way the economics of it all worked out, because Stuart was working from home, away from home. But it is a big sacrifice, not one I regret now. I think it was definitely the right thing to do and the right thing for the family. But I think everyone has to be realistic about how hard it actually is, I think, for mothers.
Yes, no, I can hold my hand up and say yes to that. But I think what comes over is just that you and Stuart really are fit foils for each other, because I think you have very different temperaments, as you acknowledge in the book, but they come together just to work perfectly. So I think, we all owe you both a vote of thanks for everything you've done. We've talked a lot, we keep saying seven siblings, 7 children, which kind of feels a kind of standout fact. But I think it's interesting, you talk about, again, at one point, how you say, the bigger the family, the warmer the home, which is something I can almost imagine up on the wall. But you also say, again, with one of these contemplative moments, the more siblings I could give them, so the children already there, the fuller their sense of identity would be. And you also say that perhaps my anxiety about who I was could dissipate into them. So this is kind of taking you back again into your upbringing and all the struggles that you've had. So again, were you aware of that as you were having one child and another, or was that again something that you looked back on it afterwards? And
I think I was probably half aware of it, but when you're bringing up lots of children, or when you have young children, you don't have time to think of thought from the beginning of the thought to the end because you're so busy and so tired. So I think I was kind of half conscious of that all the time. I was very aware of my desire to have children. I think children are very funny and they're very wonderful. And I loved having children, and I love children. And I think, yes, I think the more children I had, the happier I was, because I thought, well, look at them. They have each other. They have their own world. And so the world outside can't be as powerful because they have their own powerful world together. So I think I definitely felt that at the time.
Absolutely. So lightening the mood a bit then from that, you have some wonderful nicknames or pet names in your family. So perhaps you could tell us about those, because it would be a great way to kind of introduce all 7 children with their names and what they're called, which actually gives us a kind of little insight into their personalities. I don't know if you can remember them all off, but
I'll have a go.
Have a go. Yeah, in order.
So Isata is Clara Schumann, because when she was recording the album, she's an interesting person, because when she plays, everything is very intense, and she's a very intellectual, intense player, but also has to lose herself in the world of what she's playing, which is why she's so quick and so deep with everything she does. So she was Clara Schumann for quite a few months. Then Brimer is Pardon, because he never seems to know what's going on. If there's a concert next week, we'll say, Brimer, there's a concert next week, and he'll say, is there? So he's in a dreamy world of his own. Then Sheku, we call him What a Final, because it's just an affectionate memory of BBC Young Musician. And also it's a joke because he never has strutted around or been pompous about anything. He's incredibly grounded, incredibly modest. And so What a Final is a way of joking about that. Then Konya is Spangly, because it's our word for having very long limbs, because there was a period when she grew really suddenly and really quickly, about 2 feet in 1 year, and her limbs are all over the place. So she's Spangly. Jennifer is, what do we call Jennifer? See, I knew I'd get caught with one of them.
And I should know the answer, and I don't, I'm afraid. Move on and come back to it. I'll come back to you in a moment.
So Aminata is Maggot, because she's always acting. So Maggot is one of the things that she calls everyone when she's doing an accent. And Mariatu is Maza, or Maza Beast. Or in fact, that's because she's our little pet, but that's changed recently to Mia, because that's on the album Carnival that's coming out this week. She plays the character Mia. And so now that's who she is.
Fantastic. And what about you and Stuart? I think, do you have your names as well?
Yes, I was always Fraying Jumper, because I'm always wearing old house clothes around the house. And Stuart is he's called Mr. Big Shot, because he's always making a speech about something.
We'll have to get him on next, I think. So we've got one question, which is, yes, it's a good one actually. Are the children competitive with each other musically?
Not at all. They're very competitive with board games and with sport and anything that they play together, but not at all with music, because they've always seen that as something they do together and help each other with. So that's never happened, no.
Yeah. Glad to hear it. But I wouldn't want to take them on in Scrabble. I think they'd be
absolutely not.
Yeah. So in writing this book, Kadie, I mean, it's a wonderful book, and again, plug, please do buy it if you haven't. I'm going to read it a second time, I think, because there was so much in it. And one of the things that struck me, I mean, it's absolutely beautifully written. It really is. Some of the imagery is so striking. I'm absolutely not surprised you've been a lecturer in English. But there are kind of dreamlike passages in it as well. And I just wonder if there's a novel weighty to come out of you, Kadie, because it seems to me that you have so much material there. And I wondered if you'd thought about it or might like to do that.
Yes, I might like to, because I think the act of writing the book did unlock quite a lot of things. Yes, and I think you have to write something to know whether you can actually do it as well.
Okay, well, we will wait for that, because I'd certainly like to read it. And what about your children? I mean, I don't know if they keep a diary, but I imagine I would certainly love to read the diaries of some of them, you know, starting with Isata. I think she would have so much to say. But have they themselves ever thought about writing anything, or do you think this is the moment when they're going to start taking notes and keeping a little notebook?
Yes, they all of them actually have done quite a bit of writing, probably especially Kanneh. Kanneh is our writer. There was a time when we all went on holiday. We used to go on holiday to Wales every year for walking, and she was the one who used to always write an account of the holiday, and they are brilliantly written. We've still got them. Very, very funny, and she's very good at seeing all our characters and describing them, and she's probably the most gifted writer so far.
Okay, well, we might be looking forward to something then. And you know, I think you talked about the new album, as we call it, coming out, and perhaps there'll be a new version of Carnival the Animals, or some kind of variation then with the lyrics by Kanneh. That would be great.
Oh, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
There we are. I do it during lockdown. So someone's just asked, are you and Stuart still playing music yourselves? And perhaps do you play together at all? Could that be something for the future when the family starts to, when it's a bit quieter in the house?
We haven't really had much quietness yet, or much time. So who knows, maybe. But both our favourite instruments that we can play is the piano. So difficult to play. We could play piano duets, I suppose. Stuart did play the cello at school, but he doesn't want to return to it. I think he feels that that's something he doesn't really. He always preferred the piano.
Yeah, I think the piano is a lovely thing just to sit down on your own, isn't it? Without fear of being overheard, and just enjoy the pleasure of playing. So, so as you've kind of come through the book, then I guess you have to decide how to end it. And there was a bit of serendipity there, wasn't there? Because we find out that we have the literal fairy tale ending, when you get a certain phone call from a certain royal family, a royal couple, asking about the presence of Sheku to perform at that wedding. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the moment you heard about this happening, and how it felt to be in that moment in front of, well, probably billions of people, wouldn't it? But just tell us a little bit about that, because it was an amazing moment, I think.
Well, in lots of ways, it was very much like all the concerts I'd attended as a mother, sitting there rigid with fear and thinking, gosh, has he remembered his shoes? Has he remembered to tighten his bow? Has he remembered his rosin? So, of course, I'm thinking about all the things that could go wrong. And I enjoyed it afterwards when I watched the recording more than I did in the present. But I always say to the children, I'm the one that has all the nerves, so that they don't have any, because Sheku was just in the moment and relaxed. But I was just sitting there, and we had all these wonderful snacks and drinks laid out so we could watch it on the television and celebrate. I couldn't eat a thing.
Oh no, I'm not surprised, but it was beautiful. And I'm just searching out my notes, and now, of course, I can't find them. This is the problem with Zoom, isn't it? If we were sitting together, I would have it all out in front of me. But I think that's my way of saying to other people, you need to buy the book, because there is a beautiful description about how it felt to be there and what it looked like, and about the hope, really, about going forward. And I think it might be the time. I think we've only got about 5 minutes left. But at St. George's, we've had some of our greatest moments recently of music making with Chineke Orchestra. And I know that your children have been very closely involved with that. And Chichi Nwanoku, who's just an amazing presence. Anyone who knows her will tell you she's an amazing, a forceful personality, which she's had to be, actually, hasn't she? But Chineke was the first Black Asian minority ethnic orchestra. And how important has it been in your lives, in the lives of the Kanneh-Masons? And do you think it will continue to be important? Is there more to be done?
Well, I look back at the inaugural concert in 2015 at Queen Elizabeth Hall, when Isita Brima and Sheku were playing in the orchestra. Isita was playing viola. And before that, they had very much, whenever they went on a concert platform or went into a competition, they would be the only people of colour in that competition, and they'd kind of forged ahead anyway. And suddenly they had all these amazing colleagues who looked like them, who they were going to perform with. And I remember Stuart and I were sitting in the audience, and this black orchestra came on stage, and everyone in the orchestra, which was in the audience, which was a much more diverse audience than we'd ever been in, all stood at their feet, and we just gave them a standing ovation before they'd even played a note, because it was the most emotional moment with so much meaning for all of us. And Stuart and I were just crying. And I think that says everything, that's what that moment meant to all of us. It was incredible.
Yeah, no, I could see that, and I could see it in, I was there at one of those concerts in London, and then when Chineke came to perform at St. George's, it was a similar thing in terms of the audience. People were just overwhelmed and crying and talking about, yes, for them it was the first time that many of the audience members said that it's people like us on stage, and it kind of goes back to what Stuart said in the book, where it is for us, this is our position, this is the place we should be in. There shouldn't be any question about that, and I really hope the barriers continue to come down, as they must. And after all, you are the advertisement of the most accomplished family one could ever imagine. So just look, behold, and think on that. The last 2 or 3 minutes, a few more questions coming through, Kadie. So yes, this is a good one. Do any family members play wind instruments? We've got lots of cellos, violins and pianos, but come on, let's hear it for the woodwind and brass. Why not? Where are they?
Well, partly, of course, it was a matter of economics. If we started introducing lots of other instruments, then we couldn't pass those instruments down. We couldn't pass the sheet music down, the lessons, the expertise. So, of course, so there is an economic issue. They did play wind instruments at school. Brima played clarinet. Sheku played trombone and trumpet. Isita played oboe. So they were definitely there. But, of course, we couldn't afford to give them lessons in everything. So that's really why.
Okay, well, I think we'll forgive you for that. Whoever asked the question, I hope you're happy with that answer. And another question, yes, do the younger children feel overwhelmed by the success of their siblings? Because I guess it's noticeable, isn't it? As you said, there are the first 4 who are quite aligned in terms of age, and they play together in groups. But what about the younger siblings? I think Mariatu talks about being better than Sheku, doesn't she? So are they overwhelmed, or actually are they spurred on?
Well, it's an interesting question, that one, because as you say, Mariatu just thinks because she's got older brothers and sisters who are doing well, that then of course she's going to do well. There's no barriers. She's got 6 role models ahead of her. So she always says, well, of course I'm going to be a concert cellist. So she's full of confidence. But of course, there are pluses and minuses, because when the older ones were doing their early competitions or playing at local music festivals or learning how to play in public, they were doing it really anonymously. But now, of course, the younger ones, it's all in the public eye a lot more. So there is more pressure. But I think it's a mixture of confidence, because, of course, they have more opportunities to play bigger concerts and people expect a lot of them. And, of course, there's a balance to be struck. And I think it's a bit of both, actually. Yeah. But definitely for the youngest, she thinks that everything's possible. Nothing bothers her.
Well, I think that's a fantastic note on which to end. Actually, everything is possible. So the last minute now before we all disappear off Crowdcast, but I just wanted to say thank you, Kadie. I mean, it really is lovely speaking to you. I would love for you to come to St George's so we could speak, bring you to Bristol so we can speak to you in person. A bit of a plug, but we have just agreed a concert with Isata, Brymer and Sheikh, who are playing in that. I believe possibly a romantic partner of one of the children as well in that concert. So we were hoping that would happen at the beginning of December, but we'll see where we go. It might be pushed out a bit. But thank you, Kadie. It's an amazing book. The family are a real tribute to themselves, but a real tribute to you, to Stuart, and indeed to your own parents. Buy the book. It's wonderful. And say we look forward to giving you a big Bristol welcome when you come here.
Thank you. I look forward to that. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.